Chapel Hill, North Carolina. A man named Craig Hicks gunned down 3 Muslims in their late teens and early 20s, Dia Barakat, and then 2 sisters, Yasur and Razan Abu Salah. Craig Hicks, seen here, was an atheist. Not just incidentally, but he was like really into the atheism thing. He quoted Bill Maher on his page. He read The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. I even have a quote from him right here. It says, "I don't deny your right to believe whatever you'd like, but I have the right to point out it's ignorant and dangerous for as long as your baseless superstitions keep killing people." Which reads as a very ironic statement, given that this man brutally executed 3 people. Was it a hate crime? Yes or no? Was it terrorism? Yes or no? Is atheism culpable in any way, to any extent? Yes or no? To determine whether or not it was a hate crime, we really have to look at the motive here. According to Karen Hicks, the wife of the killer, the alleged killer, the incident had nothing to do with religion or victim's faith, but instead had to do with the long-standing parking disputes that my husband had with the neighbors. Now, I feel a bit of incredulity when I hear that this man who was well-educated just killed someone over a parking dispute. Like, oh, you're in my spot. Bang, 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 bang. But I find it equally unlikely to think of that person killing these 3 people just because he hated Muslims. And there's some evidence against the idea that he hated Muslims, by the way, but we'll get to that in a moment. The father of 2 of the victims, the 2 sisters, Dr. Muhammad Abu Salah, says, "It was execution style, a bullet in every head. This was not a dispute over a parking space, this was a hate crime. This man had picked on my daughter and her husband a couple of times before, and he talked with them with his gun in his belt, and they were uncomfortable with him, but they did not know he would go this far." I don't think you can demonstrate that this was a hate crime in the absence of, a manifesto to the effect of, "I'm going to kill my Muslim neighbors because they're Muslim." There's nothing on his Facebook page that would lead you to believe that he has an especial hatred of Muslims. When it came to building the so-called Ground Zero Mosque that a lot of Christians in America opposed, his response was, I don't see how the Christians can possibly discriminate against the Muslims. They were equal in his mind. So if he would have shot 3 people who happened to be Christian, would we say that he did it because he hated Christians? I think people are too eager to see this as a parallel to Charlie Hebdo. I think Muslims want to latch on to this incident and say, "See, you guys are just as bad as us. You guys have this fringe element too." But I'm getting ahead of myself. Was it a hate crime? The answer is, honestly, I do not know. I don't know. It may have been. It may not have been. It's very muddy. Anyone who is claiming that they know this, I think they're pretending a degree of knowledge they don't actually have. And was it terrorism? That answer I'm more certain of. The answer to that question is no. It absolutely was not terrorism. Terrorism is defined as violence or the threat of violence in order to effect some sort of political change. As far as we know, there's a few possible motives floating around for this crime, but affecting political change, that one's not even on the radar right now. So I don't know how this is labeled an act of terrorism. I think it comes from the pithy remark that I've heard some Muslims make on Twitter, that if this is a white man gunning down 3 Muslims, but if we're the other way around, a Muslim gunning down 3 white men, then he would automatically be labeled a terrorist. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that someone would say that someone's a terrorist just because they're incidentally Muslim and they murder someone. I mean, let's think about this. Most people in this country didn't even label the Fort Hood shooter a terrorist. Some people did, but there was debate about it. And if there was debate about that, I don't think there should be any debate about this. This is not terrorism. There was no political agenda involved here. It's not, free these political prisoners or I'm going to kill these Muslims. Now, the last question. Is atheism culpable on any level to any extent? I have here some Twitter posts from people who seem to think that it is. There's also an article by a woman named Elizabeth Stoker Brunig, who wrote a piece for the New Republic called "The Chapel Hill Murders Should Be a Wake-Up Call for Atheists." And that article is so bad that I'm actually planning to address it in its own video. But for now, I'm going to leave you with these people on Twitter. It is said, #Chapel Hill shooting terrorist killer Craig is radicalized by Muslim hater Sam Harris. #need investigation. Sam Harris has never, ever condoned people going out and doing violence against Muslims. That is a radical mischaracterization of what he has said. I recommend that everyone check out his debate with Cenk Uygur here on YouTube. A debate that I think Sam Harris wins and makes Cenk Uygur look like a jackass pandering to the unthinking branch of the left wing. Sam Harris, Bill Maher, and Richard Dawkins should go apologize to the parents of Chapel Hill shooting for what their Islamophobic fan has done. So if you criticize Islam, then you are culpable anytime a Muslim is murdered, apparently. If you say, I really disagree with this tenet of Islam, I think that this is stupid, I think this is wrong, I think this is barbaric, and then someone listens to you, and then later on, whether by design or just incident, they end up killing some Muslims, you're responsible, you're culpable. Because you dared to criticize an ideology. That's a scary line of thought to me, folks. This reminds me a lot of in the 90s, after the Columbine shootings, the media decided to irrationally blame the music of Marilyn Manson. And I was a Manson fan at the time, so I remember it very distinctly. All of a sudden, I'm turning on every news channel, and I'm hearing from every media source, and I'm hearing from my classmates at school that the guy I listen to is going to cause you to murder people. I was dragged out of class and brought to little private meetings with the guidance counselor because I wore Manson shirts to school sometimes. And that was problematic. That was like, oh, we better watch out for that kid. He might shoot somebody. And now I feel like I'm almost re-entering that same atmosphere. This irrational, fear-mongering bullshit. There's quite a few more, but they're all basically the same tone. They all basically have the same line of rhetoric behind them. So was it a hate crime? Maybe. Was it terrorism? No. Is atheism culpable? Absolutely not. I know I didn't really touch on the atheism's culpability stuff as much as I'd like to, but I will be doing that more in a follow-up video to Elizabeth Stoker Brunig's New Republic article. So keep your eyes peeled for that video. I'm the Amazing Atheist. Peace the fuck out. I recorded this video a few days ago, and I now have some addendums to make to it. On the subject of whether or not this was a hate crime, the police investigation has concluded that this crime was indeed a dispute over parking. Some opinion columns on news sites, both prestigious and otherwise, are still saying that it was a hate crime. Their evidence for this is that it came out that Craig Hicks was uncomfortable around hijabs, the headscarves worn by many Muslim women. This is shoddy evidence. Just because he was uncomfortable around the hijab does not mean that he murdered these people because they were Muslim. It would be like saying, you have a friend who makes fun of fat people, and then he murders a fat person because they knocked over his lawn gnomes or some ridiculous thing. And then the news media says, oh, well, obviously he did it to this person because they were fat. No, he was a hothead. He did it because they knocked over his lawn gnomes. His hatred of fat people was just incidental. Now, maybe something called pseudo-speciation was going on. That's where we dehumanize someone because we say, oh, well, they're not really a human being because they do this thing that's different that I don't like. Fat people aren't human. But did Craig Hicks say ever that Muslims weren't human? Did he ever say anything about committing violent acts against them? I think that's a stretch just from saying, oh, well, he was uncomfortable around the hijab, therefore he was dehumanizing them, therefore he must have murdered them because they were Muslim. I think that's a pretty shoddy line of reasoning. And that's not to say that it's not possible that he murdered them because they were Muslim. It's just to say that there's no evidence to suggest that. I would also like to add that I condemn this murder as I would condemn any murder, and the fact that the killer was an atheist like myself, who even hung out in the same circles that I did, makes me sad and uncomfortable. We should always make sure that the atheist community, both online and off, is one where that sort of violence is always roundly condemned. I think a lot of times when violent acts happen in the name of religion, atheists like myself say that the moderates don't do enough to condemn those actions. And since an atheist has committed these actions, even though I don't think it was related to his atheism, I want to make it clear that I strongly condemn him, and I think that all atheists would probably strongly condemn him. I can't speak for everyone. I'm sure there would be some fringe outliers with radical points of view, but they would be in an extreme minority of people that are not running around in the Dawkins and Hitchens and Harris circles.